All right, so this is going to be the video that kind of just goes over the basic movement system of the skeleton character. The skeleton character is just a simple bipedal character. It is a segmented character, but it is also a single skin mesh, which means all of the separate components have been combined together to create a single piece of geometry. It is skinned to the joint system, which we'll get into a little bit later. But it is seen as a single piece of geometry, even though it is segmented, made up of multiple pieces. The first thing that I want to kind of go over with this character before we get into the full movement system is talk about installing the script that goes along with it. This script does have an IK-FK matching system. It allows you to match the position of the FK to wherever the IK is located, or to match the IK to the FK. This doesn't necessarily do the keying for you. You still have to set the keyframes for both sets of controls if you're transitioning, but it does allow you to match the space and location of where your IK is if you want to go into FK mode without any type of weird popping between the two different modes. So I'm going to go ahead and go over how to get this installed and where you need to install it. First things first, you're going to get a project folder that's a skeleton project, and inside that project there's a folder called scripts, is where you'll find the skeleton IK-FK underscore matching script. This is going to be the script that you will be working with. In addition to that, there's also a skeleton IK-FK icon that goes along with it. So what you're going to want to do first thing is go ahead and just move to your Maya 2020 preferences. So just go ahead and click on Maya from Documents, Maya 2020. Go into your user-defined preference folder, this prefs, and then inside here you're going to basically just move this script into the preference script folder. This will basically allow Maya to see this and recognize it the next time you open Maya up. If Maya's already open, you're going to need to close it because it probably won't know that it's there when you try to run it. The other thing you're going to want to do is go to the icons folder, and inside that icons folder you're going to want to grab the skeleton IK-FK image and place it in there so that it can be used as a shelf icon. Alright, so once you go ahead and basically get those two elements inside of that preferences folder, you're going to go ahead and open up Maya and then open up the scene file of the skeleton master scene file. Alright, so when it comes to getting the script to work and actually open up, you're going to type out the following command. So just go to General Editors, Script Editor, and in a Python window just type out the following command, which is essentially import and then quotations or make a string skeleton underscore IK-FK matching. It does need to be in a Python tab when you do this. It is written in Python, so it's important that you're using a Python tab for this. And then the second line of code you need to include with this is the name of the script, which is what this is called, which is essentially the same thing as this. This is just saying import that script from that preference folder. And so it's the name of the script, and then it's the function inside the script that opens up the UI. By basically typing those two elements together, you could middle mouse click, highlight them, and middle mouse click them up to the shelf here. Once you have it on the shelf, you can go ahead and right click edit. You should see the two lines of code that you wrote, and then under shelves you can just change out the icon with the image that is associated with it. So just go ahead and hit open and you'll be good to go. Once that's done, hit save all shelves and you'll be golden. And then what should happen is when you click this, it should open up this little window that allows you to kind of match the position of the IK to the FK or the FK to the IK for both the left and right arm. All right, let's go ahead and go over the basics of the rig here. I'm going to start down here at the bottom with the global control. This control really shouldn't be used for moving the character around in terms of animation, but more about just getting it positioned properly within the scene. This is kind of geared more towards being a game asset character for the game animation course, but it could actually be used for anything. It holds up fairly nicely with Smooth Mesh Preview, and out of Smooth Mesh Preview it still looks pretty good because all the normals and stuff have been softened. So either way, but the global control is set up to just be a positioner. It's like to kind of get the character in the scene where you need it to be to do the animation. Translate, rotate, and a single scale value. The single scale will scale it in X and Z as well. This just ensures that the character doesn't get improperly scaled in one direction or another. So that's why it's set with just a single scale value. Moving up from the the global control, we have our foot control, and I'm not going to go over both sides of the rig. The left side is exactly the same as the right side, so all the controls you see on the left will be there for the right as well. Basic simple system for the foot, right? You've got your translate to lift the foot up, move the foot out. You've got your rotation to kind of change the angle pivot at the ankle. And then you have all of your individual foot movements and foot positions. So you've got things like toe pivot, which is like twisting the foot in a Y direction towards the toes. You've got a toe roll, which lets you kind of roll up onto the tips of the toes for like things like walk cycles, run cycles, jumps, things like that. Toe lift, this is going to let you kind of lift up the toes so you can kind of go upwards with them as a pair and not just individually. You have a heel pivot, which again lets you basically kind of rotate the heel on a Y-axis. You have a heel roll, which lets you kind of roll back onto the heel. You have a heel lift, which would basically lift the heel up off the ground but keep the toes pinned. And then you have foot bank. So foot bank is just kind of your left and right foot movements to work with that. Past that, we get into the big toe movements. You have essentially curling, spreading, and then also twisting. Unlikely movement, but still not wanting to limit you guys or the animators working with it. Give them everything that they could possibly want. All right, so again, curling for the little toe. That's what LT stands for. It's little toe. BT stands for big toe. Spreading, and then again, twisting. And then at the very bottom here, we have essentially foot control visibility. There are a set of foot controls that do the exact same thing as all of those attributes. Some people like to animate with all the controls in the viewport. Some people don't. I included both. They work together. So if you basically ended up rolling onto the toes, you could still go ahead and still do the same thing with the toe roll here and having a slight adjustment, right? So they work independently of each other. You don't have to basically, use one and only one. You could use both if you wanted to, although I don't recommend it. It's just extra curves if you do it that way. But every single movement that you see under foot controls also has a viewport control that you could use to associate it. The only one that doesn't is foot bank. Foot bank is only available as an attribute. It's just easier to handle it that way. So that's why I decided to not include that. I'm going to turn those off. I don't like animating with viewport controls. I'd much rather animate attributes. Moving up, we get to our knee or our leg pull vectors, essentially. That's just there to kind of aim the direction the knee is going to face in. Pretty straightforward, pretty necessary. It's not attached to the movement of the foot. Maybe in another version I might end up doing that, but as of right now I left it separate. Moving forward, we get to our pelvis. This is an independent lower part of the body control. It's essentially just allowing us to kind of counter key or counter position the pelvis. So if the hips are doing anything, or the torso is doing something strange and odd that's making the pelvis look weird, we can counter key it. It can also be used to kind of change the direction the hips are facing without affecting the upper part of the body. Stepping up one level, we get to the root of the character or the cog, the center of gravity. This is a translate, rotate, control. It's essentially what you would use to move the character's center of mass, around. If you were going to make him walk forward, you'd want to use this as kind of moving your hips forward. If you want to move them up and down, if you want to rotate it left and right, all of that stuff is going to kind of affect the character's center of gravity. Moving up from there, we have an abdominal control or abdomen control. Basically, it kind of affects the middle torso between the pelvis and the chest. And then moving up from there, we have a chest system that allows us to kind of move everything from the lower part of the chest to the top. From there, we get into the clavicles. Pretty simple system here. Just translate, move it up and down to kind of get the arms engaged. It can move forward and backwards. If you notice that the clavicle does rotate around the rib cage, along does the scapula here on the back side. We'll come back and look at the arms in just a second because there's a little bit more with the arms than anything else in the rig. We have simple FK system for the neck. It's got two neck positions. It's got a base neck, and then it's got a middle of the neck. And then we also have our head control. In a future version, I will be adding in a mandible and probably some facial controls to kind of move the eyebrows around. But in this particular version, that's not included. All right, so jumping back down over here to the arm system. So the arm system is probably one of the more complex elements. A lot of the arm is kind of controlled, or which way you're animating the arm is going to be controlled essentially through the hand control itself. So the hand control will work and move with either IK or FK system. Doesn't matter which one you choose to animate out of. It's going to basically move with both. the IK-FK switch, which is the first control you're going to see on there, is how you blend between IK mode into FK mode. This is not the same thing as matching the positions. This is allowing one of the control systems to be engaged and disabling the other control system. So for example, when you have essentially the IK-FK switch value set to 0, you are in IK mode. If you take it and switch all the way to 10, you are in FK mode. Now you may notice that the controls for the FK do not populate. They're not visible even though we're in FK mode. And that's because there's independent values to turn on and off the IK and FK control systems. Many times I've found a need to basically hide them and also need them on at the same time. So the easiest way to kind of handle this is to basically just create a system that lets you turn them on and off as needed. So with the FK controls turned on, we can now see where they're positioned. So if you look here, it's set to IK-FK switch 10. So basically, I now am using the FK system to manipulate the position of the character's arm, right? If I want to go ahead and go back into IK mode, I can go ahead and start blending. Now, between the values between 0 and 1 and 9 and 10 are absolutes. What that means is that it's either full IK or full FK if you're in a value between 0 and 1 and 9 and 10, right? 0 to 1 is IK, 9 to 10 is FK. As you get in between those, so for example, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, those are going to be basically blended. They're going to be shared between the two. This is just to make for a nice, easy transition from one mode into the next, right? Ideally, you should only be animating either at 0 or at 10, and just using the in-between as a blend, as a simple way to kind of blend them. All right. So again, we'll go ahead and just return the control values to 0, so that way there's no weirdness or strangeness going on in here. All right, so coming back to the hand control, you'll also notice that after you get past the IK-FK system, you also get into all the fingers. So essentially, you have the ability here to kind of curl the fingers, and you could basically do like all the fingers. So essentially the index, the fingers, the thumb together, so you can kind of curl inwards, make a fist. You have the ability to spread the fingers outwards, inwards. You have the ability to twist the fingers, and then also you have this set of attributes of here called thumb drop. And thumb drop is really just about kind of being able to drop the thumb position as needed. So like if you wanted to kind of put the hand, the thumb more like this way, you could easily do so. That's what the thumb drop does. It's kind of more of a middle of a hand position or pivot point. It's kind of nice when you're trying to make a character make fists or hold things. Thumb drop works pretty well. And you have your 3 axes that you can work with thumb drop. If you go to the very bottom, you'll notice that there is another set of finger controls. This is just like the foot. All of those finger controls that we see, everything from fingers all the way down to the bottom here, can be accessed through these actual viewport controls. Again, I'm not a fan of animating with viewport controls, but some people are. So I'm not going to basically cancel that out on anybody. It's there if you want to use it. And like the foot, if you use one, you can use the other one too. They work together. They're independent systems, so they basically aren't going to manipulate one another too much, right? So like obviously if you go ahead and do, let's say for example, the index curl, you're going to basically naturally add some curl to your finger, but you could go ahead and start curling it even further using the viewport control. Again, not recommended because it's going to create 2 separate animation curves for the same movement. All right, thumb drop again. Basic system lets you kind of position where you want the thumb to be located. It's great for kind of making the character hold a weapon or a sword or something like that. All right, moving forward, I'm going to jump back to the IK-FK systems here really quickly. So the brighter or more saturated colors are always going to be your IK, and then the duller, more muted colors for the controls are going to be your FK systems. So here I am in basically IK mode at the moment. You can kind of see that I'm using that single control to kind of position where I want the hand to be located, the arm to be located. I can change my pull vector. Let's talk a little bit about the IK-FK matching system, the script that we installed at the very beginning. So let's say that at this point I want to start animating in FK mode. This is where you get to use this script, right? So my FK has been left alone this entire time. I haven't done any animation with it. I need to get it to basically be in the exact same position that the IK is in so I can animate seamlessly between the two. What I'm going to want to do is go ahead and activate the script so the UI comes up. and then choose the mode that I want to match to. So I want to go ahead and match basically the FK to the location of where the IK is. So I'm going to click on FK to IK, and you'll notice that when I do that, each of the controls now align perfectly with the IK system. If I were to go ahead and go back to the hand, I could blend seamlessly now into the FK mode, no popping, and I can start animating now from this position as if this was the mode that I was in all along, right? So this is kind of a cool feature that's in there. It should make animating this character that much easier, especially if you're doing, you know, real big wavy animations and then switching into something where you need to keep the arms pinned. Being able to switch into IKFK mode is going to be great. All right, jumping back to the IK system really quickly, there are some extra attributes that I want to talk about. In the IK system here, let me go ahead and switch back real fast, back into IK. There is a space match. So with that space match, what this allows us to do is it essentially allows us to kind of have the arms either stay independent in their own space within the world, which is what it's set to by default, or we can get them to kind of match the movements of the hierarchy they're attached to. So for example, if I want the IK arms to move with the clavicle system, I can go ahead and switch that space control to clavicle, and now the IK will move with the clavicle as it goes up and down. Kind of a cool feature. Not something that you probably need to do all the time, but it's kind of nice to have the arms capable of following the movement of the chest, which is another option, or the clavicles, as we see right here. So if I go in, I can switch to chest mode, and what will happen now is if you start to animate in chest mode, that IK arm will now start to match the position of it. It'll follow along, which is kind of a nice little feature to have in there. But by default, it is set to world space. All right. As I mentioned before, the right side is exactly the same as basically the left side. They're identical. The only difference is their colors. FK controls for the arms are going to be the duller versions. The IK controls are going to be the more saturated versions. Last but not least, we get into essentially the prop that goes along with the character. In this case, it's a sword. I will be adding in a couple other props. I'm got an idea for a shield and also possibly like a bow or something that the character could basically kind of draw back as if it were shooting arrows. The sword is set to be animatable on its own, so you can basically set it to none, or basically its parent space to none, and it will just basically be something you can move about as you need to. If you do want to attach it to a particular arm though and have it move with the arm, you can switch either to left or to right. Both of them are matched up perfectly. So for example, if you go ahead and switch into the left, this will now move with the left arm as the arm moves. So you can go ahead and do some pretty cool attack animations and not have to worry about, you know, posing that each time to move with the arm. The controls are clean, so that means you can kind of do whatever animation you still need to do with it, even though that the arm is unattached. So kind of a nice little feature there. A couple other things to kind of keep in mind with it. You obviously will need to, you know, kind of position the hand and the fingers to kind of wrap around it, but the default position of it is already in a space where the fingers and thumb can actually curl around it nicely. So if you just go ahead and start to kind of, you know, curl your index finger in, you'll see that it'll fit really nicely. It's already positioned to kind of take on that space for us, right? Very little pass through if you just kind of watch how much you're going through. The angle of the sword's already set up. Same thing with like thumb drop. We'll go ahead and throw a little bit of Y in there, and then a little bit of thumb curl, right? Maybe a little bit of thumb twist, and then we can kind of, oops, wrong twist. There we go. And then we can kind of get in and finish that off, right? Maybe make that a little bit tighter. All right, something like that looks pretty good. Okay, so and you can kind of play around with it as needed, right? Kind of take a little bit of that rotation out of there. There we go. So something like that looks pretty good. We've got the hand, and this will work with either IK or FK mode. It does not matter which mode you're in. You can choose them to basically animate either one, and it'll still move and follow accordingly. All right, that is essentially the skeleton rig. A couple things for those of you guys who are using this for the game animation class. You'll notice that it's got a pretty intense hierarchy of joints and whatnot. It has two separate skeletons. It has a skeleton or a joint system that is the bound system, and then there's a skeleton that is essentially the rig skeleton. So the R, J, and T, that represents the rig skeleton. This is your basic movement or control skeleton, and this is the one that's bound to the character's geometry. When it comes to exporting it out, you don't need to go through and select all of those. All you need to do is type in star B, J, and T up here in the search by name. So the star is a wildcard. It'll allow you to ignore all of the other characters in the name, and it'll just look for anything that ends with B, J, and T. That just stands for bind joint. That's the suffix I like to use for my bound joints. And then I hit enter, and then what will happen is it will select that hierarchy for me, and then you can go ahead and select your geometry inside this list, right? So pretty straightforward there. Same thing with the sword, the weapon. When you're exporting these out, you should be able to go ahead and just grab the root joint. Should naturally already be selected through the BJNT process. You'll just have to make sure you select both pieces of geometry when you export out to go into Unity or Unreal or whatever you need. But it shouldn't give you any issues. I've already done this a couple times now with two animations that I've created. Both of them worked really nicely. Okay, couple things in addition to the skeleton master file. That you guys are given. I also have in there two different animations. I have a run animation that I've created with this character that isn't using the sword. So basically you could just export this out without the sword animation. And then in addition to that, there's also a run animation where there is a sword that can be used as well. So if we go ahead and look at this, you can see that the sword animation, sword is moving with the character's hand. The cool thing about this setup is you could go ahead and switch it over to the right side, and it would match up perfectly like you did the hand. So obviously there's a little bit of pass through on his head. I had to fix it on the left side, but the cool thing about the sword is that you could put it into any hand you want, and it'll basically work fine. So feel free to kind of mix and match and play around with it and do some cool stuff. But this is the skeleton rig. What I'd like you guys to do is play around with it. Do some animations. Make him do an attack, make him do a run, make him do a jump. See if there's anything that's happening with this character that is causing an issue or some type of error or something that I didn't anticipate. I've already updated this twice. There were a couple things that kind of popped up, and I'd imagine that in the future there will be more mistakes. Make sure that when you guys do use the character, that you guys are referencing the character and not just basically opening the skeleton master. That way, if we do end up updating the rig, we add some new features, like when I add in the mandible in a future version of this, or add in another weapon or a shield or something, your scenes will automatically be able to be updated with those new assets if you're referencing. If you're just opening this scene file and saving, then you're not going to be able to basically update. You'll have to reanimate those scenes, and it'll just be kind of chaotic. So make sure that when you use this, you reference it. That way, any changes or adjustments that are made to the rig and you get a new version of it, you can just swap out the master file in the project folder, the rig skeleton master, with the new one. It'll automatically update the scene. Originally, the skeleton did not have a sword. This was the run cycle without the sword, and then basically what I ended up doing was bringing in the sword and making a couple little adjustments to the rig, and then I got the same run cycle. They're identical run cycles. One just has the sword in the character's hand, the other one doesn't. So kind of cool setup there. But anyhow, that's the rig. I'd love to know what you guys think. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, download the character from this email, watch this video, and good luck. Have fun.